Welcome to the YourTown television program. My name is Jeff Kline, and I'm your host for this MPS Foundation sponsored segment, where we bring you interesting faculty and students and what they're doing in the Monterey Peninsula. Now, MPS is a Navy educational institution, but we pride ourselves in the fact that we host many different nations and other U.S. services as students at the school. And today we have a special treat where we have two U.S. Air Force officers for you. I'd like to welcome Major Clayton Schuety and Major Lucas Will. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
Now, before we start talking about the really interesting research that you all are doing, let's learn a little bit more about what you've been doing in the Air Force. And so, Lucas, let's start with you. What made you join the Air Force?
Yes, sir. So I'm from Wisconsin, a small town in the middle of Wisconsin.
Wow.
And grew up liking science and math, and got very interested in wanting to be an engineer. So when I was a senior in high school, a guidance counselor came to me and said, there's a scholarship opportunity. You can join the Air Force, and they'll give you some money to pay for your college and go get a degree in aerospace engineering.
Great.
And so that really drew me in. I wanted to eventually go design things for NASA or for design aerospace systems. So I got a scholarship to go to ROTC, and at first, kind of like a lot of people, I think, joining the Air Force, I thought I would test it out,
right,
kind of see what it was about. And then when I got to my first year on campus, I did a ROTC in University of Wisconsin-Madison.
Great.
And I just loved it. I loved the people. I loved the opportunities we got to do, places we got to go see, and the rest kind of went from there.
Well, we're going to go to your career after you graduate. So you got your aeronautical engineering at Wisconsin.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's very interesting considering what you're studying here, which we'll actually talk about in a minute. But Clayton, what about you? Where did you go? How did you join the Air Force? And why did you join the Air Force?
Well, I'm also from the Midwest. And
what part?
I'm from Iowa.
Okay.
So I grew up in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. My family's largely from Northeast Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
And I did a little different path. So I originally didn't join the Air Force when I went to college. Although my father was in the Army growing up, so I had that in my background. That probably played a little bit into why I elected to go into the service. But,
sure.
But I started out going to Iowa State University. I wanted to do engineering. And I started out in the civil engineering program, and then I transitioned into chemical engineering.
You went from civil to chemical.
I did.
Most people go the other way. That's pretty a challenging jump. Congratulations for you.
Yeah. Well, I originally wanted to do chemie, and everyone said, well, that's pretty hard. So I set the bar low, and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to go for it.
And you got it.
And I did.
Congratulations.
So I graduated with a degree in chemical engineering, but between my sophomore and junior year, I took an internship with a corn milling company. They made corn syrup and different products, cornstarch, and I did that job, and it was really interesting. It would have paid well, but at the end of the day, I looked back at what I wanted to get at the end of life. Looking back on my life, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, what would I be proud of? And I didn't think that would quite do it for me. So I wanted to be part of a larger organization. I wanted to be doing something that I could be proud of, and so I found that in the military. So in my junior year, I joined ROTC, and I got commissioned and became a pilot in the Air Force.
Great. So since you brought that up, Clayton, what did you fly? What did you learn to fly?
So I started out going through flight training, doing T6s, and I went to Corpus Christi. I did T-34s or T-44s down in Corpus Christi. And
now, is there Navy pilots that go through that too?
There is. It's a joint program,
right.
And at the time there was Air Force and naval officers that were going through that program. I finished up that, and then I selected to go to Air Force Special Operations Command and fly the AC-130 gunship.
So describe what the AC-130 gunship is.
Yeah, so for those who aren't familiar, it's like any other C-130, but it's loaded with sensors and weapons. So it's particularly the one I flew was a 105mm cannon and the 40mm Bofors cannon.
Oh, I got to ask this question then. When the 105 actually goes off in a C-130, do you have to adjust something about flying in it, or does ships, when they shoot broadsides, move a little to one side? So
that's a common question. I think the way I like to explain it is, imagine yourself riding a bike down the street, and someone just comes up and kicks the back tire of your bike. That's what it feels like. So you'll feel that jolt, but you're in a nice left-hand turn, and it's just physics that holds you right into that.
It holds it in that area. Now, will you always return to that airframe, or will you fly C-130s in other forms too?
Well, AFSOC has upgraded their gunship fleet, and they're transitioning to the J model right now. So after graduation, I'll go back to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and qualify on the J model, and then I'll go back to. It looks like right now I'll go back to Florida.
And that's the one base that I see you transition in Arizona, but Florida is normally where for Special Operations Commanders, there air base there that actually.
Right, it's Hurlburt.
Airfield. You go to Hurlburt.
Yep, it's in Florida, and then there's also a Cannon Air Force Base in New Mexico. And those are the two primary CONUS bases.
All right. Well, Lucas, what did you do after graduation?
Yeah, yes, sir. So I also became a pilot.
Uh-huh.
So I first went down to Texas and flew the T-6 Texan, the aircraft.
Okay.
So that was a fixed-wing plane, but I didn't really like the aerobatics of it very much. So I volunteered to go fly some helicopters instead, which I actually enjoyed very much.
Now, they're not actually supposed to fly, are they?
No, they are not. They beat the air into submission is one of the common ones that we hear. I'm
sorry, what's the Air Force helicopter?
So from there, we go and train in the Huey, actually, which
right.
was phenomenal. It was Vietnam-era Hueys flying out of Fort Rucker, Alabama, and our instructors, most of them were Vietnam-era vets.
Is that right?
It was
wow.
quite an experience. They would, fly the helicopter with their one finger on the stick, wondering why you couldn't hold it. So that was a really neat experience. And from there, then I got selected to go fly the HH-60 Pavehawk, which is the Air Force's search and rescue helicopter. So it's a Black Hawk variant, and it's designed to go out and pick up folks who would need search and rescue out in the battlefield.
For CSAR capabilities are that sort of thing, or combat search and rescue.
Correct.
And so where are some of the places you served in that area?
So for that, I went through training in New Mexico, and then went out to Okinawa, Japan was my first assignment.
Kadena?
Out in Kadena,
sure.
Correct, which was phenomenal.
Yeah.
I love Japan. I love the location. I met my wife out in Japan.
Oh, fantastic.
And really enjoyed flying. It's like a Hawaii of Japan. It's beautiful scenery. A lot of times we flew at night though, so we didn't get to see it. So we're, our NVG's on, just kind of enjoying the ocean at night. But it was a very beautiful assignment.
Well, interestingly enough, before the show we were talking about that I was reared in the Air Force as an Air Force dependent. And when I was 13, 14, and 15, I lived in Kadena Air Force Base, learned to dive there, fell in love as well, my first loves and that sort of thing. So it was a great place, absolutely. Yes. So at what point did you come to MPS, and why did you come to the Naval Postgraduate School, Lucas?
So then after flying helicopters, I wanted to get involved in a little more technologically advanced airframes. So from flying helicopters, then I volunteered to kind of join the emerging remotely piloted aircraft fleet that the Air Force is flying.
Right.
So at the time it was Predators, and then now it's kind of the Reaper aircraft. So it's the remotely, you fly it from a box here, either in Las Vegas or around the world.
Sure.
But the airplane is actually physically located somewhere else. So I volunteered to fly that. Did one tour of that in Missouri, and then one tour teaching people how to fly those down in New Mexico.
Now, where in Missouri?
Whiteman Air Force Base, Missouri.
I didn't realize that we controlled them there.
Yeah,
it's I thought that was just a strategic base for bombers.
Correct. It's got a lot of other
stuff on it
as well. But yep, it's one of the locations. The Air Force in general is plussing up how many of these remotely piloted.
Now that must have took a different flight skill.
Very much
you don't feel that 105 kicking you in the back tire, so to speak. So it's almost. Did you have to get used to that? I would get vertigo. I'd get sim sickness, for crying out loud.
So you do. You just have to get used to a cross check with your eyes of scanning the different screens and realizing what the information is telling you.
Right.
Luckily, growing up, I grew up with video games and growing up in the generation where I'm used to scanning multiple screens for a lot of information. So it wasn't that big of a transition for me. And the airplane is very automated. So a lot of it, you're kind of making sure it does what you commanded it to do. So the flying part was actually, for me, was just fine. I actually enjoyed it.
And then from there you came to MPS?
And then from there, yes. So then as majors, you get a chance to get selected to go to a school in order to get your intermediate developmental education, which is what the Air Force calls it.
Sure, but that school could be at Maxwell Air Force Base. That school should be a war college. But you all selected, well, you're both engineers. You decided to select a Naval Postgraduate School.
That worked out pretty well. So it's a competitive process. We select which school we would like to attend. And I think as Air Force, actually the Naval Postgraduate School is seen as a good school to get into, a high bar to get, because it's a joint school. It gives you a chance to go out and meet different people from different services.
Right.
And therefore, when you come back to the Air Force, you can speak a little bit of beyond just Air Force terminology.
Sure. No, absolutely. And Clayton, now it made sense. You're in the Defense Analysis Department.
Yes, sir.
So what made you decide to actually go into that department and come to MPS?
Well, when I was filling out my dream sheet of where I could potentially go, like you said, there's a number of different locations. I had a lot of friends that had gone to NPS and told me what a wonderful experience they had. And when I looked it up, which I hadn't really known a whole lot about it before filling out my list, when I dug into it, I realized that the curriculum here is really focused on special operations, irregular warfare, low-intensity conflict, and that's something, being in the Air Force Special Operations community, is highly relevant, and it gives me an opportunity to think about these topics in a meaningful way, and a lot of other programs don't get that focus that I would find here at MPS, so it was really attractive.
Well, see, now that made sense given the fact that you're the Air Force Special Operations Command and that capability as well. But Lucas, the Predator program isn't exactly in that line, so why did you decide defense analysis?
It's a little bit of a mix. So I came from ACC, which is Air Combat Command, so which is not special operations. However, the people we interface flying the Predator
are frequently special operations.
Operations.
That makes perfect sense.
So similar vein in terms of wanting to go back and have that kind of strategic impact.
Right.
I'm in an air stack, which is just when you're in an objective area flying around. I find that I'm often in the stack with probably something that Lucas is flying from afar. So in a way, we've met each other before.
We've met each other before, but in a little different virtual environment.
Right.
Got it.
Yes.
That's great. Well, now I want to turn a little bit onto what your research is, but let me prep the conversation by informing the audience that you all have just published an article in a very well-respected news blog called War on the Rocks in Washington, D.C., and that article has gotten a lot of readership, including, just yesterday, as we talked about before the show, the Chief of Naval Operations. Clayton, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about, first, what that topic is, and second, why did you pair up with Lucas?
Sure. Well, the first thing, when Lucas and I started the program out together, we talked a lot about what kind of things were happening where we had just come from. We both just had deployed, and we were looking at that environment and what challenges we saw, and we wanted to tackle something that was relevant to our nation. And what we gravitated to was the conversation around autonomous systems, drones, that have really emerged onto the battlefield because they're cheap, they're low cost, they're commercially available. We keep seeing these things pop up on the battlefield, so we thought, well, how's that going to affect us? And that really got us to thinking about, well, how's the adversary using it, but how could we potentially use it? And so we looked at, our thesis deals with how we can train swarms of autonomous systems, and we're wanting to use it in a novel way, which is to use artificial intelligence, or in a different way, machine learning, to teach these behaviors in swarms. And so we think that that's going to be highly relevant as we put more autonomy into the battlefield. Okay,
well, you said it, so I'm going to challenge Lucas to answer this one, right? So when I think of machine learning and artificial intelligence, I think of a computer that has a database that actually learns from that database, in the sense that the database has outcomes. That's a learning database, right? And that it looks at those outcomes, and in a way we use advanced both statistical techniques and other branch and bounding techniques to teach that computer how to think.
Right.
But you're now talking about swarms, which are all small little things that have although we do have small type computers, but do they actually have the computing power to do that, or are you capturing some other way to get swarm behavior and AI and machine learning mixed together?
So that's a great question. So for ours specifically, we are using the machine learning and the AI to train the algorithms, how the individual drones are going to make decisions, and have that kind of pre-programmed into the machine before they go out into the field.
Oh, I see. So that those algorithms, you're using the AI and MI to create the algorithms then go into the swarm.
Correct.
All right.
And for us, the reason why we think that that's important is we get this emergent behavior out of the swarm, where little interactions between how individual agents can interact, but over long periods of time, or large masses of these drones, can cause this broader global implication.
Behavior. So I'm going to use a simple analogy, and tell me if I'm close or not. I'm going to call it duck logic, and that is when ducks fly in V's, for example, they don't all look at each other. They look at one to the other. And in some way, that simple rule of maintaining position creates the formation in which it does.
Absolutely. And what we're using is a simulation with the artificial intelligence playing this simulation, and for instance, for our thesis, playing it millions of times to come up with what those little interaction rules should be. How should I the duck look at the neighbor duck, and when I see him do something, what should I do? Just a few simple rules over, a couple hours of gameplay or thousands of drones spread out can cause these novel emergent behaviors.
Okay, now here comes the other question with the duck logic, right? So if it were ducks from Wisconsin,
yes,
we're heading south.
Correct.
So what emergent behavior from these simple positioning rules make them head in one central direction? Is there one head duck that knows what to do, or how does that work?
No, so it's decentralized, and we think that that's more resilient in a battlefield situation where you're going to have losses, or maybe the communications are denied, so you can't have a central controller or operator push out the commands for each little drone. So if they have these just basic characteristics on how they communicate and make their collective decision, that's better. And there's a fear that with this emergence you can't control it to a specific mission. You don't know maybe what it will do because it has an emergent behavior.
Right.
But what we want to do is train them for very specific missions. So you give them a specific example or a task that you want them to do.
And that's called selected AI, or what is that?
Narrow AI.
Narrow AI.
That's right.
Narrow AI.
Yep.
Right.
So narrow AI to focus on a very specific problem. And in our thesis, we use a base defense scenario. And so in that circumstance, you can say, well, this is how it's going to behave in this environment on this mission, and that gives a commander trust that they're going to do what you want them to do, and confidence that you'll be able to achieve your actual mission.
Well, this is a key element, the trust aspect, and you're saying that using narrow AI specific mission areas to gain that trust so that they see that emergent behavior doing what they expect it to do to protect the base. And the base protection is great because it can protect, of course, against potential UAVs that are coming in and that sort of thing, which is great. Now, have you had a chance to experiment with this at all or take it to the field yet?
Unfortunately, no. That would be our next step, and what we plan. We're graduating in December,
sure.
So we could move some of this research to maybe the oncoming
students
who are coming up.
Right.
And maybe they could take it out to the field. There is a field, Camp Roberts, which is just a bit south of Monterey.
Our entire consortium for robotics, unmanned systems, education research, and our 3 or 4 labs, the Arsenal lab, the CAVAR lab. We've had several of those people on the show before, and you're
Absolutely.
right. So this is where ideas meet our researchers here at MPS, and they can take it out in the field and actually test it, which base defense is an important thing. Well, Major Clay Schuety and Major Lucas Will, thank you very much, both for being in the Air Force. I'm glad you are. May you go all the way and achieve your goals in your professional life. And thank you also for being on the show. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, sir.
You bet. And thank you for joining us for this segment of the YourTown television program sponsored by the MPS Foundation. My name's Jeff Kline, and I hope you join us again in the future for looking at the interesting aspects that we're doing at MPS, our students and faculty, their research, their studies, and their professional lives.